that Corbyn might be on track to form a new group in Parliament with these other MPs, precisely because of their collective support for Gaza, although their left-wing ideology and collective disgruntlement with Labour likely helped.
Jeremy Corbyn is furious with Starmer's massive betrayal and is out for revenge.
And I think that is the crucial question. Is this the beginning of a larger group? Is this going to suck over sort of left-wing dissidents who don't like the Starmer regime, don't like the Starmer government, into a bigger group? I think that is perfectly possible.
Starmer won't get away with ruining Britain, as Corbyn plans to get rid of him.
Is that if Labour want to survive in the short to medium term, Kier Starmer needs to go. That's the only decision that Labour MPs can take now, is to create an exit for Starmer, whether it's in 6 or 12 months. He needs to move on and needs to be replaced.
Labour's days are limited and they might just throw Starmer under the bus.
And the media is still speculating about exactly what impact reform will have in the run-up to the 2029 general election. Despite all of this though, it seems that another trend in British politics has gone relatively unnoticed: the left-wing pro-Gaza movement. We also saw a number of independent candidates, frustrated with Labour's stance on the Israel-Gaza war, secure election to the House of Commons in the general election. Again, like Reform UK, there were 5 of them, and there are more rumours that they could be on the precipice of forming a new political party in the new year.
Reform UK is getting all the headlines, but another massive threat to Starmer is on the rise, and it's led by Corbyn.
Each of the 5 candidates beat a Labour candidate in the election. Shocker Adam dramatically unseated Labour's Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth. Ayub Khan unseated Labour MP Khalid Mahmood. Adnan Hussain unseated Labour MP Kate Hollern, and Iqbal Mohammed unexpectedly defeated the Labour candidate in a newly created constituency. All of this is on top of Jeremy Corbyn, who, for the first time in his career as a politician, fought against a Labour candidate.
Starmer executed a disgusting plan to get Corbyn suspended from the Labour Party, and now Corbyn's back to destroy Labour.
In total then, every single one of the 5 MPs rumoured to be starting a party together beat a Labour candidate in the election in traditionally Labour areas. It should come as no surprise then that they all share a left-wing ideology. Without this, they would have struggled to defeat Labour in their constituencies. However, they also all share a strong affinity with the Palestinian cause.
Corbyn and his potential new party humiliated Labour in their own constituencies, and Starmer's terrified of what's coming.
That Corbyn might be on track to form a new group in Parliament with these other MPs, precisely because of their collective support for Gaza, although their left-wing ideology and collective disgruntlement with Labour likely helped. Francis quoted Shocker Adam explaining that the group was looking at options that would give us more access to the levers of power. It seems that Francis was correct, as on the 2nd of September, the Independent Alliance was formed.
Corbyn's Independent Alliance was formed because Starmer had betrayed everything Labour stood for, and they're angry.
Political parties, though, are kind of the backbone to how UK politics works, and to be taken seriously, the Independent Alliance needs to take the next step and become one. According to James Heal, writing for The Spectator, the Pro-Gaza Quintet is already looking at doing this, and are looking at filing paperwork in the new year to register a new political party.
By next year, the new party will likely be here, and they'll do some serious damage to Starmer's power.
That Starmer is becoming less likeable and less electable. While a large part of this is a result of scandals and the fallout from policy decisions such as the budget, it does show just how fragile his electoral coalition really is. It underscores the argument often made on the right of British politics that Starmer didn't win as a result of a wave of support among the electorate, but rather a wave of discontent with Tory rule. As the next few months and years drag on,
Starmer and his gang of cronies have had countless scandals, and nobody wants them around anymore.
Polling from YouGov from April this year demonstrates that 49% of those that supported Labour have more sympathy with the Palestinian side. This is compared to 28% of the public overall. While this polling did take place prior to the election, it does demonstrate that if Starmer continues his support for the Israeli government, it's entirely plausible that he could face backlash from the left, something that Corbyn's new party would almost certainly capitalise on.
A lot of Labour supporters align more with Corbyn, and if Starmer continues to be utterly useless, he'll soon fall behind.
Joni, what's your message to Kier Starmer tonight? I think it's fair to say you've had your disagreements. What would you be saying to him right now?
I've just been re-elected for Islington North, and I hope you're very happy about that because you're my parliamentary neighbour. I hope you'll also remember you didn't want me to be a candidate.
Corbyn issued a chilling warning to Starmer by letting him know that the British public wants change. The implications of this new party are huge, and Labour might be in huge trouble. How far Corbyn will push Starmer remains to be seen, but so far, things are looking pretty bad for Sir Keir. Meanwhile, there's one huge question that needs to be answered here.
Nick Drew, who asks, what impact will Jeremy Corbyn's proposed new group of independent MPs have in Parliament? Can they do more than noisily troll the government? Could they be a force for policy change? I do like this idea of trolling the government as a concept.
Starmer's leadership has been so incompetent and disastrous that everyone has been trolling him. Of course, it's not exactly difficult to make a fool out of Starmer and Labour, given how often they do it to themselves already. The bigger question here is whether or not Corbyn will be able to bring some actual change. Will he push the tone deaf Starmer to listen to the British public, or is all hope lost? Well, given the things Corbyn has planned and how there might be an internal collapse within the Labour Party coming very soon, things might just change for the better.
I was talking to Jeremy Corbyn yesterday about this, actually. And I said, to what extent have you got a kind of political philosophy that goes beyond your position on the Gaza war? And he said, well, Gaza war, very, very important. Complete arms embargo, very, very important. But he said, winter fuel allowance, the two-child cap.
It's not just the stance on Israel and Palestine that's being discussed here. Sure, Corbyn is extremely passionate about that topic and utterly despises how horribly Starmer and Labour have handled the issue, but there's more at play. Virtually everything Starmer has done in government has been a complete disaster and a shameless betrayal of the public trust. Starmer made countless promises to help out the vulnerable and working class Brits, but all of that turned out to be lies. Starmer has completely gutted the pensioners and the country is in outrage over it. Corbyn isn't the only one against it either. There's a growing army of Labour ministers who are considering joining him.
I said, are you walking slowly towards an actual manifesto? He said, well, it's a very, very slow process. We don't know each other very well yet, but we're getting on very well. And yes, I can see more of that kind of thing. We have a joint positions, particularly on welfare and in due course on tax probably as well. And so, of course, then the question is, what about all of those former comrades of yours, John McDonnell? What about all those people who have lost, for the time being, the whip?
This Labour government has been a very slow and painful train wreck to watch. Thankfully, during all of that, Corbyn and his independent alliance had been working on a potential manifesto. They're coming up with many joint policies that will actually appeal to the Labour supporters in this country. If Corbyn manages to offer real reform and genuine welfare for those who need it, Starmer will lose a ton of support overnight. Not just from the voters, things might go as far as to multiple Labour ministers defecting to Corbyn's party.
That is the crucial question. Is this the beginning of a larger group? Is this going to suck over sort of left-wing dissidents who don't like the Starmer regime, don't like the Starmer government, into a bigger group? I think that is perfectly possible.
Corbyn has some very powerful and influential friends in the Labour Party. Once his new party has been created, we might see all of them throwing Starmer under the bus and aligning themselves with Corbyn instead. Labour tries to hide it, but many of their ministers absolutely despise Starmer and his policies. Now that Starmer's behaving like a full-blown dictator, even more people are turning against him. In fact, recently one minister resigned from the Labour Party and wrote a scathing letter to Sir Softy.
Is that it would, as it were, strengthen people more to the left inside the government when it comes to choices about welfare, when it comes to choices about tax or whatever, because they will be able to say to the chief whip and say to the prime minister, look, if you go in this direction, you're going to lose another 2 or 3 people to this group. And you get to the point where, of course, and there are lots of quite small groups, but, they're already nudging up against, they may well quickly overtake reform.
The good news is that if Corbyn goes ahead with his new party, that will have an actual impact on the government's policies. The people within Labour will end up joining Corbyn because he'll appeal to what the left actually stands for instead of the wishy-washy nonsense that Starmer keeps peddling. Another reason is because Starmer would be absolutely terrified of losing even more support than he already has. If, in the future, he continues to ruin this nation, he'll end up losing all support from within the party as well. Everything is in place for Corbyn, but he just needs one missing piece to get rid of Starmer.
At the moment, the new, as it were, Gaza MPs aren't particularly media friendly or media trained. In my experience, don't want to come onto the mainstream media much. So it really is Jeremy Corbyn himself. I think the crucial question is, at some point, does John McDonnell, who is one of the best media performers on the left in British politics, does he come over as well? In that case, it'll be a real force.
Currently, Corbyn's independent alliance doesn't have the media training to publicly expose and humiliate the likes of Keir Starmer. And more importantly, most of them don't want the spotlight. So Corbyn is looking for his former colleagues in the Labour Party to join him and lead this crusade against the corrupted Labour. Of course, Starmer is going all he can to prevent that from happening. In fact, during the elections, he ruthlessly started purging all opposition.
Was really Keir Starmer unleashed, and the big, massive march of the Blairites, triggering their purge of the Labour left. And I don't think any of us really expected the purge to be as savage as it ended up being. I mean, we know that Labour top brass secretly find a lot of the more hardline left-wing part of Labour like really embarrassing.
Starmer is extremely hungry for power, and that's why he's so dangerous. He got rid of Corbyn on purpose because he was too scared to fight fair and square. Similarly, or all throughout the election season, Starmer kept hatching nasty plans to purge the Labour Party of everyone who didn't agree with him. It's not just Corbyn either. Many other people like Diane Abbott were targeted, and Starmer sent the full force of his cronies to eliminate all competition.
But for the sake of seeking peace, a lot of people assumed that they would be sort of tolerated at the very least. What we saw last night was that they don't even want to tolerate them. They want to cull them all together. And I think for a lot of voters who are wary about putting their trust in Keir Starmer, this will be quite a moment for them, and something they'll look at actually quite positively.
People were on the edge about voting for Starmer, and he slowly purged all other options. Make no mistake, this was a ruthless and appalling strategy by Starmer to win the election. It doesn't just end there. Starmer's sinister plan was to completely rewire the Labour Party, and now all of those lies, broken promises, and scams are being exposed. Needless to say, everyone who voted for him in the past will never trust him again.
But equally, the downside for Keir Starmer is that a new civil war has erupted. The sort of ruptures in the party are expanding, and there's been a big backlash, not just from the left, but also from some moderates as well, particularly around Diane Abbott, because she is such an iconic figure. So it's all kicking off today.
Starmer's plan is backfiring on him horribly. He thought that culling everyone who disagreed with him from the party and ruling with an iron fist would be easy. Now, he's facing countless interval rebellions within the Labour Party. Turns out Sir Keir didn't think that his own people would despise him for behaving like an idiotic dictator drunk on power. Now Corbyn is looking to use this rebellion, and Labour is desperately trying to get rid of Starmer.
But just bring us up to date, because we had Jeremy Corbyn's campaign launch as an independent candidate, no longer a Labour candidate. He's been expelled from that party because he's standing against them. That's in Islington North. Faiza Shaheen as well in Chingford, and Diane Abbott as well. There's someone I'm forgetting. Lloyd Russell Moyle as well.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, I remembered him now.
Right when Starmer was targeting Diane Abbott, Corbyn stood as an independent candidate to teach Starmer a lesson. In Corbyn's own words, the excuse that Starmer used to expel him from the party were greatly exaggerated, and some might say they were plain nonsense. Even Diane Abbott exposed Starmer in recent interviews, and the truth is much uglier than any of us expected.
I actually think that Angela Rayner's intervention was a lot more sort of planned than perhaps people give it credit for. I think that she's a figure that the sort of behind the scenes, Morgan McSweeney, Labour top brass.
He's the man running the election campaign.
Yes. Yeah. If she goes out and says, delivers a line that will, satisfy a big section of the party who are not happy with what's happening, that sort of ticks the box for them and gives Keir Starmer space to sort of distance himself from making that call.
That's right, Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, and Rachel Reeves were all in on the plan. According to some people, the whole thing was an elaborate scheme for them to gain power and hijack the Labour Party for their own goals. Is it any coincidence that now all three of them are abusing their powers and enjoying freebies that are worth thousands of pounds? Many people believe that while Starmer was carrying out his plan, Angela Rayner's job was to do damage control and make it seem like they cared about the future of the party.
But on the record, everyone has ruled it out, and so I think a lot of the rest of it is noise. And I mean, obviously there can be U-turns once whoever gets into power does, but I think at this stage of the campaign, it would be really, really politically dangerous for Labour if they got in to then U-turn when they're saying at this stage of the campaign.
To nobody's surprise, all the lies that Starmer told the British public were exposed. They promised that there won't be any tax increases and the pensioners won't have their winter fuel allowance taken away. The moment they got into power, Starmer made a U-turn on all of it and exposed his true colours to the public. If you find that hard to believe, see what the Labour's own ministers are saying. One such minister, who recently resigned, dropped some pretty huge bombshells.
Rosie Duffield's resignation letter, honestly, read the whole thing. It's in the Sunday Times today, but I'm just gonna read a couple of sections, 4 or 5 different sections from it. It's about 2.5 pages. You made the choice not to speak up once about the Labour Party's problems with anti-Semitism during your time in the shadow cabinet, leaving that to backbenchers, including new MPs such as me, says Rosie Duffield, talking about Kier Starmer.
The resignation letter is absolutely damning for Kier Starmer and his incompetent cronies. It details everything wrong with this government and does that in some pretty harsh words. Labour is in crisis mode now, as Starmer will do everything he can to brush this matter under the rug. None of us expected Starmer, the man who claimed to have integrity and honesty, to behave like a dictator, even within his own party. He completely ignores all the other ministers and does whatever he wants. It seems that even Labour ministers think that Starmer is tone deaf.
You have never regularly engaged with your own backbench MPs, many of whom have been in Parliament far longer than you and some of whom served in the previous Labour government. You have chosen neither to seek our individual political opinions nor learn about the constituency experiences nor our specific or collective areas of political knowledge. We clearly have nothing you deem to be of value, says Rosie Duffield of Kier Starmer. Your promotion of those with no proven political skills and no previous parliamentary experience, but who happen to be related to those close to you or even each other, is frankly embarrassing.
Remember when Starmer endlessly bashed the Tories with allegations about cronyism? Well, now we have Starmerism, a mixture of incompetence, hypocrisy, and cronyism. Those who were close to Starmer ended up rising through the ranks of the Labour Party. Isn't that convenient? What's more is how the letter exposes Starmer to be an absolute hypocrite. Even Labour's own ministers know that he fooled the British public and went back on everything he promised.
She continues, the revelations of hypocrisy have been staggering and increasingly outrageous. I cannot put into words how angry I and my colleagues are at your total lack of understanding about how you've made us all appear, says Rosie Duffield. It really is an astonishing letter. One more paragraph. How dare you take our longed-for victory, the electorate's sacred and precious trust, and throw it back in their individual faces and the faces of dedicated and hard-working MPs. The sleaze, nepotism and apparent avarice are off the scale, says Rosie Duffield.
What an incredibly scathing letter. This will only worsen Starmer's already ruined reputation, as the British public will lose even more trust in him. They're not even wrong, as we did trust Starmer with a huge responsibility and he bottled it. Labour fought for 14 years to finally secure a victory, and thanks to Starmer's stupid decisions, they'll probably have to wait another decade for the British public to trust them again.
This is a very big story, there's no doubt about that. And one of the reasons it's such a big story is because the letter, as you've pointed out, clearly indicates the feelings within the Parliamentary Labour Party. I suspect she speaks for a lot of Labour MPs.
She's mentioned that, certainly. She says that there are others who feel a similar way to what she does, perhaps not to the extent that they would resign, but she certainly puts forward the idea that she's speaking for, not just for herself.
This is an absolute scandal, and one that Corbyn is counting on. What do you think will happen to all these ministers that are resigning from the Labour Party? Of course they'll end up joining Corbyn, and we'll see a whole wave of people defecting to the new party. Starmer and his insecure government will be in shambles, and the Liberal elites are already fed up with Starmer's shenanigans.
This shows how vulnerable Kier Starmer is. Perhaps we won't see other Labour MPs doing what Rosie has just done, but there is absolutely no doubt about it that the feeling within the Parliamentary Labour Party Party, perhaps not amongst the new Labour MPs, who will be, quite jubilant, they've just arrived in Parliament, but anybody who's been there since 2015, 2010, a lot of them have been overlooked by this new management, Starmer's management. They are clearly very unhappy.
A vast majority of the senior and experienced people in the Labour Party echo the same sentiment. A huge number of them don't want to resign, but if they're given a chance by Corbyn to change parties, they'll likely agree in an instant. Meanwhile, Starmer is having a mental breakdown over the whole matter. He's being humiliated from all sides, and the public deems him the worst Prime Minister in recent memory. At this rate, Starmer's regime might be over much sooner than expected.
The biggest point here is that if Labour want to survive in the short to medium term, Kier Starmer needs to go. That's the only decision that Labour MPs can take now, is to create an exit for Starmer, whether it's in 6 or 12 months. He needs to move on and needs to be replaced.
Starmer has not only brought Britain to its knees, he has destroyed the Labour Party with his incompetence and sheer stupidity. Naturally, Labour is now seriously considering getting rid of Starmer because they've already suffered a huge blow in terms of popularity thanks to all the new delusional policies Sir Kier has brought in. Couple that with Corbyn's growing threat, and Starmer's days as Prime Minister seem limited. Starmer and his cronies are losing all support, and it's about time that they are held accountable. Now, that's something you can help out with by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.